Whoa, I'm fucking so white. Um, Post a little workout. Forgive my sweatiness. And you know what? There's too much light in here. That's a lot better. So, I was referencing a lot of kind of metaphysical or meta whatever. I'll be honest, I'm not too well spoken, not very verbose, especially when it comes to ideas that I'm not sound on. Ideas that, some might consider preposterous or unrealistic or impossible. And in the last video, I was discussing various channels of thought that lead to impossible or difficult to grasp ideas. And just a quick note on the saying difficult to grasp. I don't mean that in a demeaning sense. I don't mean that in a way that elevates someone that can grasp it. It is more so a continuation of all of the aspects I have already talked about, and so happen that you have chosen those pathways, those proximal, navigatable sequences to be the person that can grasp that. All that means is that those choices have led you to find this video. Not that it has that much importance, but it is confirmational, right? And if you are witnessing this and that is something that you did not fully grasp, then all that means is you are one step closer. You are one neighborhood, universal neighborhood, step closer towards being able to grasp that. But again, it's all circular. There is no necessity to grasp anything that I am going to be talking about. But I'm just going to get this out of the way. So whenever I'm talking and I get into this weird mental acuity realm, into this zone where I am, locked in or whatever, and I'm deliberating or consciously putting forth the thoughts that are appearing to me as I, navigate these particular decisions, as I surf across, of course not very consciously, those realms that I have kind of discussed. Actually, that's where I was going with this. I always get interrupted. It's happened to me so many times in my life, and every single time it's like I know I'm about to get interrupted. And then that interruption can pose one of two possible pathways. First, in terms of feelings, it feels like I'm being interrupted by the space and presence around me, or by the happenstance of chronological timestamps of occurrences, of things that would have happened, and that idea returns to the secular nature of, or spectrum nature of chronology. Perhaps I experienced all of those sequential things that brought me to beginning recording this video or the previous video or any future video from now. And in so having a semblance of an understanding of how time and chronology works in relation to the rest of the universe, that I spent those periods specifically, unconsciously, not even related to consciousness, more so just happenstance, but a coincidental happenstance, a happenstance that can almost be defined if you are some external source that has control over four-dimensional space, or four-dimensional time, or either or, really, again, interchangeable. So imagine you have this omnipotence. Imagine you have the omnipotence to know what is going to happen, and there are two sides of you, one evil, one not. Maybe not evil's not a great word, whatever, it doesn't matter. And the evil one is always saying to your more benevolent and nicer side, and it's saying, even though we are omnipotent And of course, I'm not trying to reference myself as omnipotent. That's why I said it's not a subconscious or really something that is related to consciousness. It's more so something that just happens to happen to me. And it feels like every time it does happen to me, I come closer to understanding why it is happening. And so, I'm not really sure what that has to do with me at all. Actually, I hate the fact that it has anything to do with me. I feel like a raving mad fool most of the time just because of the way that my thoughts are structured and how I happen to experience or happen to come across experiences that are, related to this. So, I mean, I'm sure you can kind of tell with that pause. I'm having internal deliberations between myself, not in a sense that I am consciously conversating with myself in my mind. There doesn't exist a simultaneous two versions of me. It is more so the connections that I have to the external sources of the universe in its ubiquitousness happen to connect me to the side that is like as above, so below. So I'm like in this infinitum of all reality and experience. And then on the same side, there is the other infinitum. And the only difference between the two is that I happen to be connected somehow in both of them. And that's at least what it feels like. But, returning to the idea I was talking about earlier, run through this experiment with me. You are, let's make these assumptions. You are omnipotent over 4-dimensional time or whatever. I don't know anything about dimensions really. I'm hardly a scientist. You are omnipotent. You have two facets of your mind, of yourself, whatever. One of them wants to lead you astray. One of them does not want your omnipotence to be further self-revealing. You're basically a god, but you don't know absolutely everything. You just know everything. Right? Like it's kind of, we'll talk about free will later, but it kind of relates to that idea. And so you realize that you need to do something, and that thing that on that day has to be conversing about, your own relations with your power, right? And just disconnect me from this, whatever. And so you're doing it, you're talking about it, and the evil side of your omnipotence knows that for a fact. If you start on this precise time, at this precise moment, there will come a pause whenever you are culminating in your thoughts to achieve some grander idea or some grander purpose or some grander understanding of whatever it is that you are going to be discussing. And you only know that because you have the abilities to reference future time. You have control over what is going to happen. And so, of course, that's somewhat paradoxical because if you do have control over what is going to happen, then there wouldn't be a need for having two facets of your own mind. But that kind of, that's the whole, like, you may be omnipotent, but you don't know absolutely everything. You just know everything. And so you start talking. And you get more and more and more on the spectrum of the good, on this side up here. And you're like, oh, I'm feeling fucking amazing. I'm having these conscious trains of thought that feel like they have something to do with the experiences and the knowledge that I want to gain. And then you get to this point and it's like, boom, the trap I laid out is happening now. So let's, that happenstance, that occurrence distracts you, right? It's like my cat, for example. I'm not blaming the cat. I could just as much blame the fact that my wooden floors hold up the litter box that my cat was scratching on yesterday. It has nothing to do with the objects themselves. It has nothing to do with me, really. I just happen to be, at least this is what it feels like. Of course, this is all ramblings of a mad fool, so just entertain these ideas. Don't believe them, argue with me, whatever you want. Actually, please say anything that would get my mind off of these ideas. Well, maybe that's not wholly true. I think I'm partial to the notion that, I have some semblance of intelligence that can put these ideas into rational and articulated forms. I don't even know if that's what I was referencing, but and now I forget why I started recording the video. I was trying to do it as some form of continuation of the last one. Oh, the free will exercise, kind of returning to that. So what I was trying to get to, and it somewhat pertains to what I've already discussed, is conscious and exercise, like the exercising of free will versus just free will. And it kind of relates to how time works, right? I think in the video I said things that will happen will only happen because they have already happened. And to expand on that idea further, imagine with me that there exist infinite possible realities. So there exists a reality in which I put up my ring finger, or I put up my, the other two fingers. And I did that incorrectly to prove, to like further substantiate the ideas that they're all interchangeable. You're just floating in this swath, in this mass, in this ocean of infinite realities that are all very close to one another. And what, let me get a little fucking crazier. Imagine you have a butterfly effect moment in which you watch this video, and then a week later you think back to watching the video and you realize that at the time you really, really, really thought I actually raised my ring finger. And maybe you fucking did, but then you revisit it. Or maybe I did, because of course, if there is infinite realities, there happens to be one where I did raise a ring finger, and there also happens to be one where both of those things happened and you happen to watch it. And then you go back and you watch the video and you're like, damn, I could have sworn ... right? It's that kind of idea. So I was exercising my free will in making the choice to raise this finger instead of, I can't even do it, but instead of my ring finger, to circularly, whatever, support the ideas that I'm trying to make, or the propositions, whatever. And so if I didn't take that time to pause and think and exercise my free will, the impact that choice would have had would not have been as impactful in the proximal regions of your specific infinitely positioned realm that you exist in simultaneity with time, right? So like if we are omnipotent and we revisit that moment that just happened and we look across all possible spectrums of that moment, imagine you like take a snapshot of that exact moment in which I was thinking about, I mean, of course you can spread time infinitesimally, or like if you're omnipotent, you close your grasp. Whatever the fuck I'm trying. I hope you understand what I'm trying to say. You can dissect it into as many small little portions as you want. But like, say you have some summation, summation of that period of time, and that is your infinitely graspable like video that you're just reviewing as an omnipotent person, right? So you're looking at it and you're like, oh, you know what? He raised all fingers, or he didn't raise any fingers, or this and that, and then you look from every vector that decision guides you on. Like, oh, if I raise this finger, it's going that way, or this finger, I'm going that way. Kind of thing. Obviously, it's more omnidirectional and it's instantaneous, and at least that's what I think it is. Because it's happening with time. Time is infinitely dissectable into perception, right? It's kind of what I was saying in the first video. Like, the only thing that we relate to time on is our perception of time. If you have those high adrenaline moments where time seems to slow down for you, it's because you are just perceiving time in a different way. Time is still happening in the exact same way. It just happens that your perception of it in that moment has slowed down, or sped up, right? And so I think, at least in a very small way, it kind of supports the idea that time, and that's where I'm going to stop the video.